talk about the role of interventional radiologists in unusual headache. So all these topics are interrelated, and as a nutshell, we are giving all three branches of headache: medical, surgical, and interventional within an hour. And we think it will be very useful to the consultants and up to general practitioners also. I once again welcome all of you, all the doctors who have logged in today, and I invite Dr. Professor Ramdas to give an address.
Good evening. This gives me more pleasure to participate in this webinar. It is one of the topics that's most important in day-to-day practice. If you look into the neurologist practice, if you take 10 patients, it almost 4 to 5 patients will fall into the category of headache only. So it is important to know how to manage the patient. It's a common problem. It is so common that any throughout the world, each and every human being will experience at least one episode of severe headache in their human life. In a survey they found that in Europe, they found that around 75% of the adults they used to have headaches. So you can look into the potential of treating these patients. It is in the neurologist practice, if the neurologist started seeing almost all the patients, it will be very difficult for them to concentrate in the other work as well as treating the other patients also. So let us look into the headache topic per se, so that it will be useful for each and every one of them in managing the patient in their practice. First, the headache, in 99.9% of the people with headache, there is no sign of tissue damage. The injuring the brain itself does not cause the pain, because brain is almost painless organ. That is why Vikram is able to operate on it without any hesitancy. But it is the structures that surrounding the brain are pain sensitive. It affects the altered brain function. However, the membrane, the blood vessels of the brain are very pain sensitive. Now come to the headache per se. We used to divide them into two classes. One is the primary headache. Most of it is caused by 99% of the individuals, and the secondary headaches, they due to some other factors, constitute about less than 1% of the headache. In the primary headache, the most common is the tension type of headache that is used to come across day-to-day life. But in our practice, these tension type of headaches, most of the time they never come into the picture. But most of the people come to the clinic or are suffering from the migraine headache. They constitute about 16% of the total headache people. This is mainly another things are the stabbing headache, the exertional headache, and the cluster headache. One of the headache that's usually thought to be as a suicidal headache, constitute about 0.1%. The headache secondary to other factors are the systemic infection, constitute about 63%. Then the head injury produces 4% of the individuals, and the vascular or the bleeding produces 1% of the individuals with the headaches. And the brain tumor, though it is most feared one, because if the patient come with the headache, the most deadliest thing that we fear is the tumor. So when a patient is coming with the headache, they always come with the fear that they are coming with the fear that they are likely to have a brain tumor. But you can see that from the statistics, it is only around 0.1% only. So now we look into the investigation. Then now we know that most of the investigations, what we are doing is, most of them it's not a profitable one for the patient's point of view. And coming to the headache diagnosis, almost entirely on the patient's history. That's one of the most important thing. It is not the CT scan or MRI going to tell you the headache diagnosis. It will be the history alone will tell you. the tests, scans, etc. rarely helpful, but definitely it will helpful to rule out the secondary causes. And coming to the headache history, these are the questions that should be asked. How old were you when the headache started? For example, the headaches when it started earlier, when it's also continuing, that means the disease may not have any significance in the as a significantly, whether it may not have a more trended diagnosis that we can make. How often do they come? Do they come in relationship with anything else? At what time do they come on? How do they start? Where is the pain? How long does it last? How bad is it? All these questions, given each and every question is answered, you will be able to get a possible diagnosis. Then this is the most important thing. When you look into this picture, we know that we can easily pick out the odd one on the right hand side. Each and every headache follows a pattern. So when the pattern is there, it is easy to recognize the headache properly, and we can institute the treatment without any delay. Then first and foremost is the tension type headache. The frequency usually chronic. It usually often coming daily. Pain is usually mild to moderate. It's a pressure or tightness. It's usually comes something you have to you are winding around your head. It is mainly because of the muscle pressure. It is coming upon. Location is both sides, whole head and neck. Sometimes it's related to the neck, and it is a time. Most of the time, when the patients are going to they fear that the pain must be from the neck. The orthopedicians will always, they used to see the orthopedicians first. Then the orthopedician will do a MRI scan. When finding nothing, then only the patient comes to the neurologist. The symptoms will be the patient will, but though it is more painful, but there is no light or sound sensitivity, or there is no aura. The typical patient, anyone can be present there. The patient is usually have got some kind of stress, and mostly the patient will start the day good, and when as the day goes on, the patient will have this kind of headaches. Then clinical characteristics of tension type of headache, as I told you, it will come with the stress and upset, pain, anxiety or depression. Acute is a pain more than 15 days per month, chronic pain for months. You can see the characteristic site where the patient will develop the tension type of the headache, usually bilateral, and it is coming to the nickel also. It is like a headband is placed on your head, and there will be like a pressing type or aching. That's a kind of pain that you should experience. Now, the tension type of headache is now thought to be due to increased brain sensitivity to normal sensory input. Few effective treatments, we are treating a non-drug treatment. Patient can be counseled about the thing. Then mild analgesics will be of more helpful for them. Then this is the most commonest type of headache that we are encountering in the day-to-day practice is a migraines called off headache. The frequency will be 1 to 2 per year or 2 to 3 per week. The pain is moderate to severe. They will describe like this. It is pulsating, throbbing. That's the most important characteristic of the pain the patient will describe. The duration will last for 4 hours to 3 days. The location usually it will be one-sided. But it is not, though it is called as a one-sided headache, most of the time the patient will have come with the both side headaches. And but the side can swap between the attacks. The symptoms, there will be aura will be there will be nausea, vomiting. Most importantly, the sensitive to light, sound and smell. And importantly, the pain that will be start from the neck, from the head, and it will radiate towards the back. Because of the stimulation of the trigeminal thalamic tract, the patient will experience the pain like this. It is so much so that you should not diagnose migraine without this kind of pain the patient is experiencing. The typical migraine patient, the onset may be at the child or teenager or young adult, but it can start at any age. It's important. You can ask whether a patient can experience a migraine headache at a later age. Still, it can happen at a later age also. But most of the time, when the headache occurs in a later age group, we always better to rule out the secondary cause than the primary cause. And 2 to 3, it is more common in women than men. It is there. Here comes the role of the estrogen hormone in the inducing the migraine. It is a hormone that because of the hormonal effect is more seen in these people. The typical patient is young women. 50% of all young women will have bigger mane because of the hormonal effect. And we can see that what happens during attack of migraine. You can see during the normal, the appetite is normal, the patient is awake or sleep, or light or tolerance will be normal, that the noise tolerance will be normal, the smell will be normal, and the fluid balance in the body will also be normal. When the patient goes to the prodrome, the patient will start craving for the food, and he will get tired yawning, and so much so that if the patient is not having anything else, when the patient has got yawning, that means the patient is likely to suffer from migraine headache, and tired and heightened perception of the noise and smell and all the inputs, sensations, and the fluid retention will start happening, and the aura will come for in a big period of time. Then the patient will go for a period of anorexia or nausea, sleep and yawning. The patient will become photophobia, phonophobia will come, and osmophobia will also come. They may not tolerate even the smell also. Then it will go for the vomiting. The patient will, like the photophobia, phonophobia, osmophobia will continue. Then the patient will start experiencing nausea. The patient himself will not vomit, or the patient, they will themselves will induce vomiting to get a relief from the headache. They will go for the deep sleep also. Then the patient will have a limited food tolerance, and patient will become tired after when the migraine is going off, and patient will get tired and feeling high or low. The patient will go for the diuresis phase, and the patient will be, appetite and everything will come to the normal. This is the course every migraine patients will experience. And what is the cause? Most of the time it's unknown, but strongly inherited. Now they are trying to find out the inheritance. They were the chromosomes responsible for the inheritance of the migraine, but it's not a single chromosome not able to, they can't look at. But now they are able to see this multimodal, many chromosomes are involved in the inheritance of the migraine. A lower threshold of spontaneously produced symptoms as if the head and brain has been injured. And many effective treatments are available for migraine headache. And you should look into the triggers of the migraine headache, usually spices, wine, usually the red wine, and the chocolates, citrus, everything is usually help trigger migraine headache. The food additives, mainly what we are using getting from the roadside shops, they always put a masala which contains monosodium glutamate. They always induce the headache. And the sleep, both too much sleep as well as too little sleep can induce migraine headache. The stress mainly usually outside trigger the headache. The female hormones fluctuate. Most of the time in women, the headache, you can see that women used to experience a headache during the menstruation time. Then towards menopause, they will have start going down, the frequency of the attack will go down. And the same kind of the thing can be experienced when the women become pregnant, where the hormone millennium will be changed from estrogen to progesterone. So at that time, the headache will start reducing. So in women, when they are experiencing, it's one of the most important things. When women experiencing headaches, it is the initial period we can manage them with conservatively. As the pregnancy advances, the headache frequency and its intensity will come down. And this is a migrainous aura. This is one of the, sometimes patients will experience different kinds of aura, so they will be more fearsome also. Here the patient will experience the homonymous hemianopia type of aura. Sometimes even the headache reliefs, or sometimes the patient will have only the aura only will be there. Sometimes the patient's aura will persist. That will give the fear that whether the patient has developed a stroke. We have few patients where the patients will have persistent aura. At that time, the P100 value will be when we demonstrate BEP, the P100 will be persisting, and later when the aura is relieved, the P100 will be restored normal. And the most commonest aura is the scintillating scotomas. The scintillation will start from the middle and it will gradually widen up to occupy the entire visual field. And it is various types of the migrainous aura that we can see. And the next one is the medication overuse headache. The patients, once they start feeling the headache, they go to the medical shop, they start asking for the tablets, and the medical people also they give the money tablets and they start using it. Initially, the medication will be giving them relief, but as the time goes off, it will get adjusted to the head tablets, and the patient will not have any relief on taking the medication. In this type of headaches, what we used to do is we used to give the drug relief for some drug off for some time, some period of time, and so that the patient will again go back to the normalcy. The headache made worse by the painkillers only occurs in people who already had headache, mainly due to the codeine containing medications or stronger morphine-like drugs. Need to stop the responsive medicines. Easier said than done, but so we have to stop the drug. Then only we have to reinsist the drug in this medication overuse headache. Then come to the cluster headache. The cluster headache is always called as the suicidal headache. The patient will have got a thunderclap headache, and it will make the patient become more crazy. They may some people have committed suicide also. So the frequency will be usually occurs in clusters every time, each year, each season. Then it will give the freedom. So the patient will be able to tell at what period of time he is going to have the headache also. Most of the time it will be excruciating, penetrating, pouring. It will be continuous, non-dropping. Duration will be 15 minutes to 3 hours. Some clock time each day, 2 a.m.
Murali? 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 Yeah, now it is audible.
Yes, sir.
The clinical characteristic of a clinical cluster headache is already shown. It is on the sides. It will be like putting like stabbing pain. The characters will be mainly sort of a stabbing pain, and the signs will be pain 15 to 180 minutes. The eyes will become more red. The watery eye, it will be droopy eyelid, running or congested nose because of the autonomic disturbance. And comes the trigeminal neuralgia. This pain is more likely we experience day to day in our practice. It is very short, severe pain, and the pain is characteristic is clear. It is knife-like pain. It is stabbing with the knife. But after the pain is stabbing-like pain comes, then the pain will lingering over a period of time. So it will be stimulated. It can be triggered by the stimulation. Cold air, touching the place, washing the face, even the jaw movements can produce, chewing movements will bring about the trigeminal neuralgia. And the typical patients will be middle-aged and elderly women. And other headaches are paroxysmal hemicrania, where the pain will come on and off over the one side of the face. And another pain is the Sankat, the short-lasting neurologiform conjunctival infection and tearing. This is a shorter version. The most important point is most of the these kind of headaches will respond for indomethacin, and these pains are called indomethacin responsive headaches. They may not respond for any other headache. And after head injury and head surgery, and another thing is the sexual headache or the coital headache. The one of the important headaches. Otherwise, patient used to headache whenever the patient is going for the exercise. So in those patients, they will respond better for the with the indomethacin, not with the any other drug. When caution with the sexual headaches or the coital headaches are, we have to rule out aneurysm in the intracerebral vessel. So all these patients, whenever if they become more symptomatic, it is necessary to go for a cerebral angio to rule out an aneurysm. And coming to the treatment part, we have to explanation the kind of headache should be explained to the patients, and we have to set realistic objectives, because we may not be able to totally cure the headache. We have to tell them, because most of the patients always they want to ask the complete cure. That was they want to have. But in headache, as far as it is concerned, most of the time it can be controlled rather than cured. And the treatment of the attack should be reduced, number of the attacks should be reduced, and the intensity of the headache also should be reduced. That's the most important. And the another thing is, it is said to go for the lifestyle changes. And coming to the treatment of the attack, that's most important thing. We have to divide the treatment into two types. One is treating the attacks and preventing the attacks. That's the most important thing. When coming to the treatment, we are having the general pain relievers. For the migraine, we are having migraine-specific treatment, especially the triptans and ergotamines. And the cluster-specific treatment are mainly the oxygen and the triptans. When coming to the general pain relievers, we are having all these drugs are available: aspirin, paracetamol, ibuprofen, codeine, and the tramadol. And you can see the effectiveness of the different drugs in different form of the headaches. And when metoclopramide and caffeine are added, the pain relief become more better. The not suitable drugs are the dextroprobaxepine, doloxin, the digesic, or morphine, pethidine should not be used. And coming to the European Federation Neurology Society, use a guideline on the drug treatment of the migraine, mainly the triptan. You can see the several triptans available for treatment for the acute management. Whenever the duration and the dose and the level of confirmation of the usage of the drugs are available in this slide. You can go through that. But very few treatments are available in the market. All the treatments are not available. Some of the drugs are available as a subcutaneous injection or oral drugs, and sometimes it can be available as injections also. And some of the drugs are available as oral dissolving drugs, and some of the drugs are available as a nasal phase, especially the zolmitriptan. And some of the drugs are available as a wafer form, likely the rizatriptan. All these drugs are available for easy usage as well as giving immediate relief. And the triptans are depending upon the onset of the action, we can divide the triptans: the sumatriptan, zolmitriptan, rizatriptan, almatriptan, and elatriptan are very fast acting. The other than naratriptan and the provatriptan are slow acting. And now we are having the new coming agents, the CGRP antagonist. It is mainly based on the drugs, the antibodies directed towards the receptors that are situated in the brain cells. So these are the drugs available, CGRP antagonists, and the several components drugs are available, and some of them are gone through the phase 3 trial, and they are found to be more effective. But these drugs are they have very much limited in their usage because of their cost factor and their side effects. And the latest is the monoclonal antibodies are available for treating the migraine headaches, but the cost is more severe, it's around coming around 80,000 rupees. But hope later it may come down. The price will be. And coming to the triptans, what are the for the triptans? What are the things for the against for the triptan? The triptans will be more effective in the migraine and the cluster headache, but it's not useful in the tension headache. It is available as a tablets, wafers, nasal spray, and injection. But against what are the things against the triptans? Or the feel when you consume, it will produce a kind of feels change, and chest pain can occur. It is expensive and the supply is very short. Sometimes it can be overused because the patients may start using it again and again. Sometimes it will become the patient will be get accustomed to the drug. So the patients are likely to take extra tablets. Then the most important factor is the constrict the blood vessels. Constriction is in blood vessels not only happening in the cerebral vessels, but also happening with the coronary arteries also. So it should be used with caution in coronary artery disease patient, especially the ergotamines. Ergotamines are a very good drugs which is widely used, but the ergotamines are notorious to produce even myocardial infarction. So most of the people know the modern neurologists stop using the ergotamine for treating the migraine headache. And coming to the preventive drug, the preventive drugs are the drugs when the patient used to have the headache frequently. It's a must that we have to prevent the headache coming on. So these drugs will be a mixed bag of drugs is available. Used to, but most of the time these drugs are used for the other conditions. They are found to be treated for the effective in treatment usually by chance. Usually for high blood pressure, depression, and epilepsy, all work in somebody. None works for everybody. So you go to select the appropriate preventive drug. Generally reduces frequency, but do not change the attacks. Key to success, trial and error, but persistent treatment. How long? We say roughly around 6 months. Need to start at low dose and increase until effective or not tolerated. About 50% of the patient will get 50% or more reduction in the attacks. The one of the important role in treating migraine patients are whenever the patients come to us, they are already treated with single tablet. So they become accustomed and they may not respond for the single drug again. So the clue to treat is select 2 to 3 group of tablets and use it together as a cocktail. So then only the patient will respond immediately. And you have to find out the tolerability and safety and the effectiveness. We have seen several drugs. The commonest drugs are the propranolol and the propranolol, amitriptyline, topiramate, and valproate are the most of the commonest drug used. In our part of the world, we are using lavalproate sodium is the most commonest drug we use, along with that of the amitriptyline. And topiramate is one more drug that was always used in the Western countries. But the problem with the Indian people are they may not tolerate the dosage recommended is around 100 milligram. But our people will use to develop acroparesthesia and sometimes glaucoma with the topiramate. And poor drugs will be methotrexate. You know the problem with the methotrexate, it will produce retroperitoneal fibrosis. And these are the drugs they are useful for the tension headaches, amitriptyline and ibuprofen. And for the cluster headache, the good drug will be verapamil, fairly used. Topiramate is used very rarely. Methotrexate and steroids are used. And rarely for the cluster headache, lithium can be used. And sometimes the non-drug therapies tablets will also be available. Treatment is also available, which will be more effectively added with that of the routine drugs, like the feverfew, butterbur, and the manual therapies, physiotherapy, acupuncture. Sometimes they used, and they used to have the Epley therapy. They used to place a electrical stimulant on over the forehead, and they used to give the stimulation on that. And the most important, when it is not useful, now we can have the Botox injection, another useful drug where we are using it more effectively, and some patients will become stop having the headache following the Botox injection. It can be more effective. The only limiting factor is the cost factor. Otherwise, it is very useful one when the patients are not responding for any kind of therapy with the the anti-migraine therapy. Then the most important thing with the headache patients are what we got told is the physical examination. It is mainly to rule out the secondary headaches. General physical examination, the blood pressure and temperature should be checked. Fundoscopy examination should be done in almost all the patients. And the CV related risk factors should be assessed. Palpation of the head and face should be done for the sinusitis. And in old people, always you can look for the thickened temporal artery also. And a complete neurological examination to be done. The neurological examination will include a mental status evaluation, the level of conscious level, cranial nerve testing, motor sense testing, deep tendon reflexes, pathologic reflexes, sensation, cerebellar function, gait testing, and signs of meningeal irritation. This is one of the most important things. And what are the red flags should be thinking to rule out the primary headaches? One is the headache beginning after 50 years of age, as I told you, and sudden onset of headache, like subarachnoid hemorrhage, hemorrhage due to a mass lesion, vascular malformation, mass lesion, especially post-fossa mass. Headaches increasing in frequency and severity, you should think of a mass lesion. New onset headache in patient with the risk factors for HIV infection or cancer should be thought about it. And these are the basic investigations to be done. And rarely, when we suspect the infection only or subarachnoid bleed, we can go for a lumbar puncture. Otherwise, without we suspecting a lumbar infection, we should not go for a lumbar puncture examination. And finally, the word is, you should know, most of the time, all the headaches can be managed by the general physicians. But there are sometimes you may need to refer to the case to the neurologist. Mainly, the physician is the inadequate level of comfort in diagnosing or treating patient's headache. Patients request for a referral. Patients does not respond to treatment. Patient's condition or disability continues or worsens. Physician is unable to classify patient's headache according to the diagnostic criteria for primary or secondary headache or disorders. Habituation or rebound headaches limit outpatient management. Patient has got intractable or daily headache. Thank you. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ramdas.
Thank you, sir.
It's an exhaustive approach to headache. Next is Dr. Vikram.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for everyone to join in this August afternoon to listen to your lectures of headache. Very happy to see that Dr. Ramadas has made my work much easier by comprehensively describing all the possible headaches and medical management for the same. Hope this lecture is very useful for all of us, mainly the general practitioners, to understand what is the causes of headache and to initiate management, because most of the time they are in front line to reach all the people for the initial diagnosis. Many a time it is said, the doctor who sees the patient first, if he is able to clinch the diagnosis, then it's much easier. If the first diagnosis missed and get wrongly labeled, then all the further treatment goes off in a direction which is being labeled initially. So let me consolidate few surgical cases and management of the cases by surgery. So just to break your monotonous, this is our trek in Himalayas, a place called Bees Kund, where the Bees river originates. Probably the Vyas Munivar had done tapas meditation in this location. So we
That is
with
not
our
seen.
family had the opportunity. I have
Slide is
shared,
not
sir.
seen. The first.
No?
No, that name only is. Yeah.
Just let me. Yeah.
Yeah, now it is seen.
So now it is seen, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, this is the top of the Himalayas at about 13,000 feet, and this is the pond in the top right, which is the place for the Vyas Munivar to have a meditation and did all his writings. So this is my family which visited there, and this is at the top of that mountain, Himalayas, at the height of about 13,000 feet. So let us coming to the headache. Sir has given clear indication that the brain as such perceives the pain but doesn't generate the pain, because neurons transmits and the thalamus receives the pain, and our pain center, happiness center differentiate the pain as a pain and the happiness as happiness. When the severe impulses from the C fibers reaches the thalamus, it is perceived as the pain. Mainly it is the dura and the vascular structures which are the causes of pain. Here this young gentleman who came with a severe headache, drowsiness, vomiting, had a third ventricular collapse. You can see in the red color mark here, there is a darkish cyst in the middle of the scan, with both the lateral ventricles, which is in white color, and have dilatation. With you can see in the ventricular wall there is some amount of seepage of CSF that indicates there is pressure inside. And this cyst, because of its obstruction in the flow of the CSF, has created a headache because of the stretch of the dura and the stretch of the ventricles. So this patient underwent neuroendoscopic excision of the third ventricular colloid cyst. Here is a small video demonstrating it. This is an endoscope introduced into the frontal horn of the ventricle, and you can see there are two veins which are converging. One vein which is here in the left side is joining to the other vein, and this mulberry like structures in the middle of the video are the choroid plexus, and this mulberry like structures are residing on a capsule, and this is arch like thing is the foramen of Monro, which is formed by the fornix. So you can see this vein is ending onto the cyst wall, and this is obstructing partly the foramen of Monro, which generally drains the CSF from the lateral ventricle. So you can see there is a stretch in the middle on the capsule, which is whitish in color compared to the rest of the area. That is where the cyst is, and this is the burr hole in the entry site. So that is where the cyst is at the tense. So to reduce the chances of bleeding, we cauterize the choroid plexus and then the surface of the capsule, so that the surface is malleable. We can hold and dissect. So this is a bipolar forceps which we use inside the ventricle to have the bipolar coagulation. We have to be very careful not to injure the veins, because injuring any one vein can lead to infarct in the thalamus or in the caudate nucleus and can cause severe trouble. So this is what we do, and then we make a small opening in the cyst wall. So I hope people are able to see my video. Hello?
No, sir.
No, sir. No, sir.
No videos.
Oh,
We couldn't
okay.
see. Yeah.
1 second, let me check. Anything can be done. Now,
No, sir. No.
are you able to see the video now?
Now it's seen, sir. Now we could see.
Yeah. So you can see this, both the veins which are joining here. Are you able to see it now? Hello?
No, no, Vikram. We can't see.
It is just paused.
1 second, let me check what's the trouble. I'll restart the presentation. 1 second. Are we able to see now? Hello? Any video seen?
No, it's just, yeah, it's just beginning
Yeah,
to
it's
play.
playing, sir.
Yeah.
Are you able to see it now?
Yes, sir, it started playing.
Probably I leave my door open. Probably the net signals are a little less. How is it now?
Yeah, we can see, but it's playing in that.
Lower speed.
No, it's playing, but it's in that. Your slide sorter view only is there. It's not playing on the.
Full screen. No, I have
Full.
not put it in full
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah.
Just now I am putting it in.
Yeah.
But when it comes to full screen, yeah. Okay, I'll bring it to this place. Okay.
Yeah, we can see now.
Yeah. So
We
this
can
is
see it.
the inside the ventricle, and this is the biomarker which we use to have a partial coagulation of the choroid plexus, and this is the thinned out area in the septum. That is just the septum which is expanded due to the cyst wall. And what I am trying to do is trying to bring that cyst into the lateral ventricle to excise, but sometimes it will be densely adherent. I will won't be able to do that. So as I am doing it, the cyst got opened up, and you can see a small pultaceous material will coming out, which is yellowish in color, which is the content, colloidal content of the cyst. So here it comes into the ventricle, and you can see the paste-like content which is coming into the lateral ventricle. So the thing in neurosurgery is you have to be very cautious and not to pull too much, causing disruption of vessels in the opposite side. So after you get that cyst partially into the ventricle, so this pultaceous material, I have devised a suction, straight suction on my own, and this is used by that controlled suction device with multiple holes in it, whereby you can empty the cyst completely. So you can see I'm using that sucker to empty the content of the cyst. So interruptedly you suck it and empty the content, because you suck too fast, the ventricle will collapse, and then you will not be able to do anything. So hope the video is seen. Probably I'll run it in this way, the video alone. Mhm. I think I'll go to the next slide because videos are not coming up. Okay. Are you able to see this is the pultaceous material from the cyst? Yeah. And it is partly sucked out. Now that the cyst wall is empty, I am removing that entire cyst through the endoscope by gentle dissection. So this is a cyst wall with no content into it. The fornix is preserved. There is no disturbance to the fornix. And slowly I am dissecting and pulling it off with multiple small tucks to the cyst, and the total cyst is pulled out gently and by multiple small. This is a small bleeding because of the endoscopic view. You are seeing it as a very high magnification. You are seeing it as a big. It's a small capillary bleed. Generally, it stops with multiple flushing, and that the entire capsule has come out. So, okay. So as we discussed, it's a dural stretch. The vascular sympathetic and parasympathetic innervations, periosteal and somatosensory innervation of the skin. These are the main, and the paranasal sinus mucosa. These are the main structures which are pain generators in the neural structures. And the classical thunderclap headache, that is for subarachnoid hemorrhage, and the vascular rupture spasmodic headaches because of the migraine or from the tumors, and electric shock like sensation. This is mainly from trigeminal neuralgia. These are the main surgical type of headaches what you get. This is a classical subarachnoid hemorrhage patient. You can see on the left side there is a large aneurysm arising from the anterior communicating artery, which has a single main feeder. The opposite anterocerebral was little smaller. Varda? Something wrong with transmission.
The previous slide either.
Yeah. So hope it is coming now. Yeah. So this is the patient with the subarachnoid hemorrhage due to anterior communicating artery aneurysm, and this is post clipping. You can see there is complete occlusion of the vessel, the aneurysm neck, and there is no residual fundus. So this is a case of vascular loop. You can see there is an arrow which is pointing to the trigeminal nerve with a small vascular loop adjacent to it, and that is the cause for this trigeminal neuralgia in this patient. Let me see whether video comes up, or we'll continue with the slides alone. Yeah, this is the cerebellopontine angle arachnoid, and you can see the trigeminal nerve here as a whitish band from the cerebellum going into the, from the brainstem going into the Meckel's cave, and you can see there is a loop of blood vessel which is hitching on the trigeminal nerve. As I move it, the vessel comes back and hits the trigeminal nerve. Causing the severe trigeminal neuralgia. Though you have multiple other procedures like balloon compression, radiofrequency ablation, medical management, and all that, if the trigeminal neuralgia is caused by this vascular loop, the best option would be to dissect the vessel and place the Teflon sponge, as I have shown here, which relieves the trigeminal pain completely, and this is a permanent relief for them. Here you can see this is a patient who came with again obstructive hydrocephalus and severe headache due to quadrigeminal cistern, arachnoid cyst, which was causing the obstruction. So here we did endoscopic marsupialization of this arachnoid cyst. So you can see that blackish colored stem which is behind the brainstem is the quadrigeminal arachnoid cyst with hydrocephalus, which we could manage by marsupialization of the arachnoid cyst. I don't want to bring it to the video because videos are not getting transmitted as effectively. And here is another patient who came with large posterior fossa meningioma, which is called tentorial meningioma, which is projecting below the tent and compressing the cerebellum and causing severe headache because of the stretch on the dura and pressure on the fourth ventricle as well the dural structures. So you can see the large meningioma and the postoperative scan where you can see there is no residual tumor. We could excise the tumor completely by lateral position and supratentorial approach and excision. So here is then another case with large cerebellopontine angle epidermoid, which is causing stretch on the lower cranial nerves as well the fifth cranial nerve with the brainstem distortion and cerebellopontine angle with the cerebellar pressure, which is the main cause for her trigeminal pain as well the hemicranial headache because of the epidermoid in this cerebellopontine angle. So which was radically excised. You can see the postoperative scans. That portion which was going above the tent also has been removed totally through the retromastoid approach and excised. Here is a lady who came with large calvarial swelling. You can see the etched out appearance in the CT scan of the patient in three-dimensional view, which is because of the calvarial tumor, which was extending up to the scalp and the sagittal sinus. This is little more complicated case because the vascularity is supplied from all the bones to the tumor, and the sinus is also involved. We had to do a bicoronal skin flap and then go around the lesion and had to chop it with a high-speed drill into multiple small pieces after devascularizing the bone by cutting all around the bone first from the normal side. and then remove the entire mass in multiple pieces without affecting the sinus. And at the same sitting, because it was a calvarial meningioma, we were able to do the defect closure with synthetic substitute, what we call PMMA, that is polymethyl methacrylate, and reconstruct the entire defect with this methacrylate and close the wound completely without requiring another surgery. This is the post-op MRI which shows complete excision. You do see some small amount of CSF collection which subsided slowly. This is another case of large aneurysm from the PCOM with severe headache and visual disturbance, which we could remove the subarachnoid hemorrhages and clip the aneurysmal sac with no residual neck and complete recovery of the patient. This is another patient with middle cerebral artery aneurysm. Again, underwent the craniotomy and clipping of the aneurysm. The patient did completely well. You can see the post-op scan with no fresh infarcts and complete occlusion of the aneurysmal sac. This is a child with severe headache and a posterior temporal pile AVM. He had undergone a surgery and Transylvian approach and evacuation of this hematoma, followed by excision of the AVM completely.
Zoom maximize பண்ணிட்டாங்க. Full screen file கொடுத்தாங்க.
This is a patient who came with high-grade glioma in the occipital lobe with severe headache of only 1 week duration. Patient underwent craniotomy and excision of the high-grade glioma with complete relief of the headache. Here comes another young gentleman with a small cortical lesion which was enhancing contrast with mixed density. And for this lesion, along with the use of our navigation and microscope with the fluorescein, which is a tumor dye, which picks up by the microscope by its greenish color, which elicited by the fluorescein, we can make the craniotomy in a smaller size exactly on top of the tumor. You can see the small U-shaped incision compared to the pinna. You can see the size of the incision, and with the help of navigation, once you localize and do the small craniotomy, the fluorescein helps you to localize the lesion. The greenish fluorescence exactly tells where the exact lesion is, and you can excise exactly in that without disturbing other structures of the brain. So here comes the next patient who came with headache, hemiparesis, and a small cortical granuloma with exactly falls on the motor strip of the patient. Because it's in the motor strip, if I had to operate this patient without awake craniotomy, then I may land up in severe neurological deficits. Thanks to the uses of intraoperative EEG and awake craniotomy monitoring system, we were able to do, under the help of navigation and the fluorescent guidance and the awake craniotomy, exactly localize with a small craniotomy size and remove the tumor in toto with awake craniotomy protocol, where the patient is fully awake, cooperating with us to assess how his neurology is intraoperatively, and we could remove the tumor completely with no deficits. So here comes another gentleman with a large acoustic neurofibroma because of the size, meager size of the tumor, it can cause severe headache. And the patient had practically, even with such a big lesion, no facial weakness. And thanks to our intraoperative monitoring system, whereby we can use facial nerve monitoring and excise the large tumor of this size as well with no facial weakness. We use our EEG technician who we have trained her to help us to do intraoperative neuro monitoring. So we can use motor evoked potential, sensory evoked potential. Along with that, we use the bipolar stimulation to localize the facial nerve. The new methodology, what called the CMAP for facial nerve, where the motor evoked potential is recorded only for facial, is also being used, and we can preserve the facial function in these patients. Here comes two more cases of acoustic where facial function is preserved. And here this gentleman, he came all the way from Vellore to got operated for this acoustic of large cystic size. He had hearing, very minimal loss of hearing, and we were able to preserve even the hearing in this case without much deviation from his preoperative audiometry. You can see both the preoperative and postoperative audiometry remains the same, with the complete removal of the tumor and no facial weakness and no much change in the audiometry as well. This is the advancement of using all these intraoperative neuro monitoring devices, thanks to our anesthesia team who are able to help us for most of our case to do the intraoperative neuro monitoring, which is a specialized kind of anesthesia where you don't have to use paralyzing agents, but to keep the patient under standstill when we use motor evoked potential, sensory evoked potential, and bipolar stimulation without much movements, even for operating during the surgery in such anesthesia conditions. Yet another lady who had a large CP angle meningioma. It mimics like a vestibular schwannoma, but practically it was a meningioma, and we could preserve her facial function as well in the same way. You can see in the postoperative scan that tumor is removed completely with no facial weakness. Here we see a large sphenoid wing meningioma. You can see the size, its size practically you can say it may be kind of size of a Tirupati Laddu. So such a big lesion causing severe stress on the dura and severe deficits in the form of headache, third nerve paresis, fifth cranial nerve weakness, all that. And we were able to completely remove this lesion with the use of high-speed drill, navigation guidance, and QSA. There is a Cavitron aspirator which breaks down the tumor completely during your surgery. And using of skull-base techniques like transbasal approaches, orbitofrontal approach, transsphenoidal approach, and we are able to remove this tumor completely. You can see the postoperative scan, but there is not even a small bit of tumor left, and patient improved neurologically. Yet another case of sphenoid wing meningioma, which is again a large one. You can see postoperatively the tumor has been removed with no new deficits to the patient. Here comes another large tumor, what we call as petroclival meningioma. These are meningiomas which are very large one, extending from the posterior fossa and goes above supratentorially as well up to medial temporal lobes, causing severe neurological deficits in third, fourth, sixth cranial nerves. And these require what we call anterior petrosectomy approach, where anterior to your internal acoustic meatus, that is the internal auditory meatus, the petrous port of the bone will be drilled and the tent will be opened out, and the entire lesion will be approached by the retrosigmoid and anterior petrosal approach. And you can see in the postoperative scan near total excision of the tumor. And luckily, even his neurology started recovering completely. We are not just handling in our hospital, the adult neurosurgery, we do have pediatric child cases with large tumors. This is a 2-year-old boy with a large cerebellar pilocytic astrocytoma. What we did was a telovelar approach. Usually, this kind of pilocytic astrocytoma and medulloblastomas, we used to go by what we called as a transvermian. That is the vermis between the two cerebellum. We will have to open out to enter into the lesion. But with the advancement, what we use is below the tonsils of the cerebellum, we go below the tonsils of the cerebellum, open up the foramen of Mejendy and remove the tumor through that foramen of Mejendy, whereby because you don't disturb the vermis, the children will not have much of truncal ataxia, cerebellar mutism kind of deficits, and you can achieve near total excision of the tumor. And lucky this is a pilocytic astrocytoma, and so the child doesn't require any other secondary surgery. The child will have to be just kept observed periodically to see for recurrence, but usually they do well for more than 15-20 years as well. This is yet another a boy with a similar kind of large pilocytic astrocytoma from the fourth ventricle, and you can see the lesion is large with the hydrocephalus, which has been removed completely. Here comes another child with pilocytic astrocytoma in the dorsal aspect of the cerebellum. You can see, dorsal aspect of the medulla. You can see the medulla is expanded and it is causing severe compression on the fourth ventricle. This again was removed by telovelar approach and completely removed. This is another child with choroid plexus papilloma in the lateral ventricle. So you can see that ventricular approach was used. Initially, we did an endoscopy to devascularize the tumor. Because the tumor is quite big, we won't be able to remove the tumor through the endoscope. We had to do a small craniotomy through the ventricle, made a small corticotomy and removed the tumor in toto. And you can see that tumor is completely removed in the last two scans. So here comes another large meningioma. You can see the size of the meningioma extending from the inferior aspect of the tent and nearly totally occupying the entire posterior fossa. You can hardly see the cerebellum or any other structures in the initial scan. And we did what we call the park bench position for this patient and removed the entire lesion through the same suboccipital midline craniotomy approach with the supracerebellar approach and remove the tumor completely. You can see postoperatively no tumor, and this happened to be a hemangiopericytoma, more aggressive than a meningioma and more vascular than a meningioma. Usually hemangiopericytomas, they need embolization, and lucky we were able to do it even without embolization and complete removal of the tumor. I think I'll cut short some few of the cases because of time lag. I am here again showing one more case of cystic neurocysticercosis. You can see in the third ventricle there is a large cyst which was removed completely through endoscope as a whole, and the hydrocephalus was relieved and patient relieved completely from headache because of this cyst. And this is a Rathke cleft cyst of another young lady with a severe headache because of the stretch of the dura in the basal aspect. This again was removed through transnasal endoscopic approach, and the stretch of the dura was relieved because of the removal of the cyst. You can see the pre and post-op CT an MRI where you can see no residual cyst in the cella with the normal optic nerve seen clearly over here. I think I have cut short few slides. Otherwise, Mutturaj will kill me. These are the few photographs of flowers which I have taken in Himalayas. I'm not sure whether it is seen also. Let me again show it. On the way of the trek. Thanks a lot for patience. I think technology killed me today for some. Handing over to Dr. Mutturaj for his presentation.
Good evening, everyone. And, I think Dr. Ramadas sir elaborately discussed about the primary causes. That is, headache. Most of the headache is 99% of the headache. Patient will have no problem, no pathological problem in the brain, and less than 1% of patient constitute will have the some surgical causes for headache. So, in vascular cause of headache, will constitute less than 1% of patient, and in the emergency department, patient with headache will constitute 2 to 4%. 99% of patient won't have any pathological causes, and the rest 1% will have surgical and vascular causes. I will talk about the vascular causes for the headache, and the vascular causes because of SAH, parenchymal hemorrhage, and parenchymal edema, and the intracranial hypertension patient. These patients will present with thunderclap headache. That is the typical terminology used for vascular cause. The thunderclap means this is the worst headache of their life, and subarachnoid hemorrhage patient is the most common one, and can happen. Subarachnoid hemorrhage will be seen in aneurysm, sacral aneurysm rupture, and reversible cerebral vasoconstriction syndrome. These patients will have convexity subarachnoid hemorrhage. Parenchymal hemorrhage, as you all know, that systemic hypertension is the most common cause, and the typical location will be in the basal ganglia, thalamus, and brainstem. Ruptured AVM can cause hemorrhage anywhere in the parenchymal region of the brain, and the amyloidosis can cause lobar hemorrhage and dural arteriovenous fistula. These patients can hemorrhage in the brain parenchyma depending upon the site of involvement. For example, superior cerebral cells, dural AV fistula patient can have hemorrhage in the frontoparietal region. Transverse sinus dural AV fistula patient can have hemorrhage in the either temporal lobe or on the occipital lobe region. Dural sinus thrombosis patient also will have hemorrhage, venous hemorrhagic infarct depending upon the site of involvement. And the parenchymal edema, that is posterior reversible cerebral encephalopathy syndrome. That is because of cerebral vascular tone involvement. They will have edema in the posterior separation, posterior aspect of the brain parenchyma. And the common imaging modality what we use is non-contrast CT, because non-contrast CT will easily pick up the hemorrhage and the edema and the Morse effect. Depending upon the non-contrast CT findings, either we go for a CT angio or MRI or MRI angio, and the carotid Doppler, DSA brain. These are the imaging modality what commonly we use. Carotid Doppler is used for patient in patient with headache where we suspect carotid or vertebral artery dissection. DSA brain, I think that is a gold standard for cerebral vascular pathology. Hemorrhage, subarachnoid hemorrhage in non-traumatic cases, subarachnoid hemorrhage, 85% is because of ruptured sacral aneurysm. Infected myocardial aneurysm can have parenchymal hemorrhage. Subarachnoid hemorrhage, that is before ruling out, most of the time they won't have any vascular problem, but before ruling out, we have to do DSA to rule out any vascular aneurysm. Small aneurysm can be seen in the posterior circulation. Intracellular hemorrhage is systemic hypertension, and we have to differentiate it in with the lobar, pial AVM, and the dural AV fistula. Reversible cerebral vasoconstriction, and this is because of there is no clear-cut pathology for this one, and it can mimic like the subarachnoid hemorrhage. And primary entities of cerebral central nervous system. These patients have multiple varying ages of infarct in the brain parenchyma, And we should differentiate between these two because management will vary. And the cerebral venous sinus thrombosis patient, that is the most common presentation will be headache, but these headache always associated with papilledema, seizure, and focal deficit. Carotid vertebral artery dissection and the sudden onset of pain, headache can happen. Headache will be seen in these patients. Idiopathic intracranial hypertension, this is a common entity we use, but other entity are pseudotumor cerebri or benign intracranial hypertension. CT will show no mass or hydrocephalus, but these patients will have transverse sinus stenosis in 95%. Okay. In the past 6 years, we have done so many neurovascular cases. I will show few of the cases. This is a 52-year-old gentleman came with sudden onset of headache. Patient is conscious and there is no deficit. So sudden onset of conductor of headache always we evaluate CT, and this is the CT findings. You can see here hyperdensity in the Sylvian system and the suprasellar system. So this is subarachnoid hemorrhage. CT angio was done, and you can see small outpoaching from the anterior cerebral artery. This is a Docker aneurysm. This is a 3D DSA done at the cath lab. We can nicely see in the Docker aneurysm. Focal outpoaching from the distal anterior A2 segment of the anterior cerebral artery. This arrow points at Docker aneurysm. This is after coiling. You can see that platinum coils were placed inside the coil mass. There is no contrast filling in the aneurysm. This is a Docker aneurysm. Patient presented with sudden onset headache. This is a second patient, another patient with a 56-year-old gentleman presented with headache for 3 weeks. But for the past 1 week, he developed a diplopia and decreasing vision. So again, he was evaluated with CT and CT angio, and CT and was unremarkable. There is no esophagus or no mass or nothing is seen. So with clinical suspicion, we proceeded with the CT angio, and we can see the posterior communicating artery aneurysm. This is a posterior communicating aneurysm, and this can cause compressive neuropathy, and that's why the patient developed headache and vision impairment, vision problem because of diplopia. This is a DS of the same patient. This arrow points at posterior communicating aneurysm and the AP and lateral projection. This is a focal heat kind of things seen in the aneurysm. This is the impending. These kind of signs are very dangerous because this aneurysm can rupture at any time. So patient underwent for coiling procedure, and this is the post-coiling procedure. We don't see there is no filling of the aneurysm. This is a case number 3. This is a 42-year-old male patient. Presented with sudden onset of headache, and he immediately became drowsy, and he came to emergency, and immediate CT and CT angio was done. You can see the base subarachnoid in the basal systems associated temporal arm of the ventricle is dilated, such as hydrocephalus. The hemorrhages were massive grade 3 SAH. The CT angio, you can see small outpoaching in the not small for compared to basilar artery, it's a big one. It's a basilar artery aneurysm. This angio, 3D angio, you can see there is a large basilar top aneurysm. This patient underwent for endovascular coiling. This is the aneurysm, and this is a coil mass within the aneurysm, and this is a post procedure. There is no filling of aneurysm. Next, this is a 40-year male patient, sudden onset headache, and immediately he lost consciousness. He is a known CLD patient, and came to emergency. So he was intubated and shifted to ICU. His blood elevation was INR was 5, and echo was done in the ICU. It showed infective endocarditis features. Patient was, I think, first frozen plasma was given, and was given. This is a CT picture. This is a plain CT. Next is a contrast CT. Plain CT, you can see the very large hematoma in the parietal lobe of vision, which dissected into the ventricle. Patient developed acute hydrocephalus, large hydrocephalus. This angio, you can see here, this is the aneurysm you see. This is a very unusual location for the aneurysm. This unusual location for the aneurysm always with the infective endocarditis features suggestive of mycotic aneurysm. This is the CT angio images. You can see here, this is the aneurysm arising from the one of the branches of middle cerebral artery. This is a DSA image. Here, this is the dissecting aneurysm. There is no wall disruption, and it's contained hematoma will be there because of deranged because of coagulopathy. This patient had developed a massive hemorrhage, and which extends into the ventricle. So this is a microcatheter taken close to the aneurysm, and this artery was blocked with glue, NBCA glue, or we used. So this artery is blocked. So this is after procedure, we don't see the aneurysm. This is the flow caused in the occluded artery. Then patient emergency, I think it was taken up for cranectomy and the drainage, but I think we couldn't save the patient. This is the 14-year-old boy. He developed sudden onset headache, and the CT brain was done, and which showed intraventricular hemorrhage. No parenchymal hemorrhage. He had only intraventricular hemorrhage. The patient had a similar history 2 years back. That time also he had that hemorrhage in the intraventricular region, but that time they thought they couldn't pick up anything. So again, I think these are outside CT film. You can see hemorrhage within the hypertensity within the cerebral, within the lateral ventricle, third ventricles. So this is a hemorrhage within the ventricle, and we did an angio DSA of the brain. It showed that small avium in the cavum septum pellucidum region, and with a small aneurysm from the in the avium. This is a color image. You can see irregular avium and a small focal outpushing here. That is a aneurysm in the avium. So here we can see one small dot here. That is a microcatheter which was taken close to the avium, and this is a microcatheter injection, and then we embolized with glue. Previously we were seeing the aneurysm here. Now post embolization we don't see any filling of the aneurysm. This is a post procedure next day CT we did. You can see the glue deposition within the avium. No hemorrhage, no infarct. This is a 28-year-old male patient, had a headache for 1 week, but no deficit. MRI brain only done. I think this it's a sudden headache, and the MRI angio you can see focal narrowing in the anterior cerebral artery. There is no deficit in this patient, and this is case of reversible cerebral vasoconstriction. So this is because of disturbance in the cerebral vascular tone. It can be triggered. There is no clear pathophysiology for this one. It can be because of excess and postpartum state, vasoactive substance usage like alpha, sympathomimetics, certain drugs. These patients will have only headache, and sometimes they will have subarachnoid hemorrhage in the convexity region. If these patients will be allotted to MRI angio, CT angio, or DSA. In DSA we can see bead of appearance, that is alternative area of narrowing and beaded and dilatations. These patients will be managed conservatively, and by the end of the 3 months, most of them it will become normal. That's why it's called a reversible cerebral vasoconstriction syndrome. This is a 28-year-old male patient with chronic headache, and he had a chronic headache for years, and he started developing seizure. So MRI was done outside, and they picked up small vascular malformation, that is a venous varix in the left occipital lobe region. So they referred the patient here for further management, and we did. Then we suspected dural AV fistula. So whenever we suspected dural AV fistula, we will proceed with the DS angiogram. So this is a DS of the same disease of the patient. Look, the common carotid artery injection disease. You can see the abnormal the cluster of vessels here, and with the dilated vein here. That is a venous ectasia, which was picked up in the MR angiogram. When we are seeing the arterial phase, we should not see this venous phase. It means fistula is there. This is a selective injection of left external carotid artery injection. This is the fistula site where artery and the venous anastomosis happen in the dura, and immediately it reflects back into the occipital cortical vein, and the venous varix happen. So these you can see reflex of contrast in the parietal cortical vein. This is the malignant type of dural AV fistula. This patient will have a seizure. Later date they can develop hemorrhage also. So this patient underwent for onyx and onyx embolization. We will take the microcatheter all the way here. We used one embolic material called the onyx, and we embolized it. This is the post procedure. Previously we were seeing, you can see lot of vessels, and this ectatic vein was seen. This is after embolization. You don't see any vessels here. When you don't see that fistula or that venous ectasis. The same anterior AP projection and the lateral projection, normal filling of the rest of the vessels. This is the last case. This is the 29-year-old, second last, 29-year-old male patient had headache and recent onset of blurring of vision, and his optical examination showed papillary edema. So patient was evaluated with CT venogram. You can see this is a transverse sinus. This is a normal caliber transverse sinus. Suddenly focal narrowing is happening. Again, normal sinus is seen. And this you can see here flattening of the optic disc region, and dilated tortuous optic nerve sheath complex, and empty cell. These features are suggestive of idiopathic intracranial hypertension. But these patients, as I already mentioned, 70% of these patients will have transverse sinus stenosis. So because of the vision problem, these patients need intervention. This is the brain angio, and angio shows the similar picture. You can see the layering here. This is the superior sagittal sinus. This is the transverse sinus. You can see the focal layering here. Gradient was measured. It was more than 42. Normally, it will be less than 8. It is more than 42. So patient need an intervention. And we placed the stent in the transverse sinus. You can see now the stenosis is gone, and the stent was nicely opened and contrast was nicely flowing. Gradient was reduced to 12, and the patient and the follow-up, I think the patient was stayed there for next 4-5 days. Headache reduced, the vision started improving. This is the last case. This is a 20-year-old, I think, medical practitioner referred from outside the hospital with complaints with the headache and the cerebral venous sinus thrombosis. And the patient was started on a low molecular standard medicine, low molecular weight heparin. Patient was conscious, only headache. And third day, second day, the patient suddenly worsened and developed a seizure and became unconscious. So patient was shifted to ICU and intubated. This is the day of admission. You can see this is the superior sagittal sinus. Normally we see dark black color thing, which is called due to flow white, but we don't see here that one. That means thrombosis here. And here you can see small venous infarct kind of in the head of the heart. Otherwise, no parenchyma, no significant parenchymal edema or hemorrhage. This is the MR vena of the same patient. AP and lateral view, you can see you don't see any superior sagittal sinus or deep sinuses in this patient. So patients in the deep this patient must be having very high pressure in the venous side. The patient CT was repeated on the third day. This is the hypertensive thrombus in the torcular region and the right transverse sinus. This is after contrast study. You can see the filling defect. This is the plain study. Hypertensive thrombus in the superior sinus and the adjacent cortical vein. You can see after contrast, you see here you can see there is filling defect. The contrast is not opacity in the superior sinus. So patient was taken up for angio, and this is the angio delayed phase. Normally we see superior sinus all the way here, and this is straight sinus and the deep sinus. Here what we are seeing is that only nothing is seen, only contrast is in the congested cortical veins. So patient is in the patient is having high pressure in the venous side. So what we did was just we aspirated all the clot in the superior sinus, and then we started patient on thrombolysis. So this is the 20-hour post thrombolysis and aspiration picture. You can see the contrast nicely opacifying the parietal cortical veins and frontal and parietal cortical veins, superior sinus, and here you can see the internal cerebral vein of Galen, deep sinus, and everything. This is the post thrombolysis CT. The hypertensive thrombus in the superior sinus is not seen now. So patient was extubated on the next day, and the patient was able to walk on the third day. So these are few of the interventional radiology cases which plays a crucial role in the vascular cause of headache. By identifying the vascular causes and treating it, we can completely cure the patient. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Muthurajan.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions from the audience?
Sir, I have a question to a neurologist.
Yeah, Dr. Amdas.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Regarding these headaches, post-COVID, a lot of people are talking about this brain fog. What is it?
Which one, sir?
Post-COVID syndrome, people are talking about brain fog.
Brain fog, sir.
Brain fog, FOG.
Fog. That I don't know, sir.
Okay. Vikram, any of you heard about this entity, brain fog? Because a lot of news are coming about in this chronic COVID syndrome. Patients complain of this brain fog or some sort of memory lapse, headache, and all these things. So, have you encountered such patients in the
Yes, sir.
post-COVID?
We do see patients with coming with altered behavior, memory impairment. We do experience it.
Memory loss. And
But we are not having any specific treatment for that. Actually.
Okay.
But some of the patients, when they again treated with the remdesivir and other drugs, they become better. We had a patient who came, and the patient was here for past over 1 month. Patient was here.
Okay.
But
Okay,
the literature says there are lots of patients having dementia following COVID.
COVID. No, this news, they're calling it as brain fog. A lot of things are coming up in the news and also on the social media and other things.
But we see more of a demyelination after this vaccination.
COVID.
Sir.
Vaccination.
After
Okay.
the vaccination, after 1 month's time, we do see lots of demyelination patients.
Okay.
Mostly with the Covishield vaccination rather than Covaxin. We don't know whether that's anything to do with
Demyelination in the spine or brain?
peripheral nerves, sir.
Oh, peripheral nerves. Okay.
They come with the demyelination. We had 2 patients with the Guillain-Barré like picture, which is not responding to regular treatment. Even for IVIG, it doesn't respond.
Okay.
We lost a patient.
So, what is the duration between the vaccination and this kind of demyelination?
More or less 1 month's duration. Sir. Most of them
Okay. 4
1
weeks.
month
Okay.
duration, sir.
Oh, okay. But did you report these things?
The case is there, sir. We have patients. We are thought of writing it, sir. We are not reporting it, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Any other questions? Because it has been a long session. As there are no more questions, I thank first of all the speakers of today, Dr. Ramdas, Dr. Vikram, and Dr. Muthurajan for having enlightened us with the topics on headache. And it was very useful, even for me also. And I think most of the doctors would have got benefited out of this lectures. And I once again thank all the participants who have logged in today on behalf of the management of Sri Ramakrishna Hospital. And I also thank our marketing department and our public relations department for arranging such webinar. Thank you. Murali?
Sir, thank you, sir.
We can...
Sir, we can call the meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you, sir.